the name of our keynote panel is Rapid Change, Good Times for Pharma, ? Well, let me ask this. How many of you, this is your first time to China in the audience here? How many first timers do we have? Well, we have a few. How many this first time to Zhuhai? Okay, a lot first time to Zhuhai. So we did a good job of bringing people to Zhuhai. So if you look out the window of your hotel room, what do you see? You see change, tremendous change. And that's true everywhere in China. Come on, panelists, come on up. So that's also true in the pharmaceutical industry, particularly in the last 2 years and even in the last month. There's been tremendous change occurring in the industry. And generally, that's been reported by the media and generally in conversation as being very positive. But is it completely positive? Is it good for everyone? And how is it impacting pharma's ability to do business in China, both small companies and large companies? Obviously, our panelists are from the large companies, but they also have perspective of working with the smaller companies here. So, yeah, generally, it's better if it's in the sequence. That way people recognize everybody. But Tom will take care of things. He's the organizer here. So what we're going to discuss today is the change that's been happening, regulatory change and other changes that are occurring in China, and how that's impacting pharma's ability to do business here. Is it improving it, making it more difficult? Is it a better time to bring pharmaceuticals and other medical products to China, or is it a more difficult time to do so? So with that, on with the show. I think we have to turn on our mics. Hello, test. I guess it's on. All right. So we're going to try and make this an interactive panel, but at the end we will have a Q&A session for the audience. So be thinking of your questions, and we'll have hopefully at least about 15 minutes at the end where people can ask questions of the panel. So to get started, I'll ask a general question, and everyone will just kind of go down the line here. Oh, no, let me start first. Let's do self-introductions. So, Zhangqing, I'll start with you.
Sure. My name is Zhenqing Li. I'm working with MSD or Merck outside of China in North America. We have a R&D facility in Beijing, so I have a responsibility for the R&D facility in Beijing.
Good morning. My name is Mathieu Merlin. I'm French, work for Sanofi. I've been in China for a little over 6 years now, and I'm in charge of business development for China.
Good morning. I'm Mark Noguchi from Roche. I head up our Asian emerging markets business development activities as well as our worldwide alliance management work. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Xiaoxiang Hong from Pfizer China, head of business development, alliance management, and PH business planning. Thank you.
Wow, I think those are the shortest introductions we've ever had. All right, so let's start with a general question, and then we can dive into the experience and the backgrounds that you guys have here in China in more detail. So the first question that I raised in the opening is, are the trends that are happening in China right now overall, are they positive for the industry? Are they stimulating R&D? Are they stimulating partnering? And within that, what do you think is the most significant change for your particular company in China? So Zhangqing, we'll start with you.
Sure. I will talk about from the primary development aspect, especially from the multinational companies aspect. I will leave other colleagues to make comments from BD or other aspect to really talk about recent changes. So my general sense is that especially over past 2.5 years, I think it's really since 2015. From the government aspect, especially the CFDA's aspect, a lot of changes or so-called reform have been initiated over the past 2 years. And many of those changes, reform really create very profound impact on the overall product development in China, especially I think those impacts are really positive to multinational companies like MSD or Merck. I think one of the immediate benefit, I think we have capitalized the values that, I think not just the MSD or Merck, it's also true to all other companies that, hey, look at the clinical protocol approval. 2 or 3 years ago, it took about, I think, 2 years, 18 months. I think also that it also changes, from time to time. It's hard to predict. But over past 2 years, I think, especially I guess over last year, the CSA, the clinical protocol approval timeline is significantly accelerated. That means that, it opens more opportunity for multinational companies, especially for China, to be able to join the global clinical trials. I think that's really very positive. In addition to that, I think, the encouragement to the innovation, especially for the new product development. I think if you look at the change from a regulatory aspect, I think one of the major themes is that the government really like to encourage innovation. I think that is the overall global trend. It's a national policy from the central government of China. And in the drug development aspect, it's really, the government really want to accelerate the new product development, innovative product development. They like to do whatever they can to bring the accelerate the process to bring innovative medicine to Chinese patients. I think that's really the positive change I can tell.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, that the China government is focused on delivering health care to the patients, to the population here. So, Matthew, for Sanofi, you're kind of covering all divisions, and you're doing BD&L across the board there. So same question to you. How have you seen, do you think this is positive, and how has that affected what Sanofi and you are doing in China?
It's a very broad question.
Well, it's supposed to get things going.
Yeah, so. Let's get things going. But no, I think we live in interesting times because indeed, if I look at Sanofi, and I don't think we are too different from the large MNCs from a commercial standpoint, is that we are coming from a stage of development that was very much reflecting linear investments and linear returns, and primarily based on geographic expansion and further access for legacy products. And indeed, I think that the pace of regular changes has really accelerated, and that challenges us, and I suspect our peers as well, fundamentally in how we look at innovation, how we look at how we operate. Do we need to generate more productivity also on the commercial side? How can we leverage the policies from a product development as well? Definitely, I think it reflects the need and the aspiration of the authorities to introduce new products, innovation, much more. I think for the first time I've seen quantitative objectives in terms of innovative products that are expected to come out of China. So yes, definitely we need to integrate that dimension. From a more partnering point of view, I think it creates a lot of questions as well. The MAH pilot, for example, that should provide additional opportunities maybe for different ways, looking at different means of doing partnering. Maybe we can get into real licensing models, for example. Maybe we could look at tech transfers and manufacturing partnerships a little bit differently. There are the ecosystems like the Spark or Suzhou or Zhangjiang that are becoming much more effective with incubation platforms, financing platforms, and so on and so forth. I think we are also challenged in our traditional innovation models, where you now see a very, very good Chinese companies innovating and I would say challenging the ways we proceed with innovation, being much faster, much more focused, maybe also cheaper than we do. So I think all of these impact us. But,
So let me ask kind of the second half of the question there, and that is there, of the changes, you mentioned the market authorization holder. So if you're not familiar with that, that's one of the significant changes that's just been announced, and it's going to be implemented as a pilot program through November 2018, but the expectation is that will continue. But basically it separates manufacturing from market authorization holder. So it used to be the holder had to do the manufacturing. Now that's not the case. So this opens up the whole CMO industry, and we're going to have a panel on that this afternoon at 4 o'clock, if you're interested in more detail there. But is that the most significant change? Or, there's other changes like the acceptance of non-China data now, and also the, tacit IND approval in 60 days. So if you were to pick one.
It's difficult to pick one because for me it's more of a mix of everything that is fundamentally impacting this industry in China. There are some elements that will definitely have a short-term impact. Definitely, using this priority review, or maybe, for a company like us operating in rare disease, the fact that we can have trial waivers maybe is something that we can tag along and see if that creates additional opportunities for us. But I would say in the mid to long term, the fact that on every dimension that you look at, things are changing, I think will challenge fundamentally MNC's models and traditional innovation models.
So change can be good, but also a challenge, right? So Mark, Roche is probably one of the early entrants to China and really helped establish Shanghai and Zhangjiang as a center of the pharmaceutical industry in China. Now it's spread out more, but I think that's a very strong center still. And Roche, when they first came to China, and we started working with Roche, I think in 2008, it was very much, well, China supports the world. And now I think China kind of stands on its own 2 feet. So again, the same kind of questions. Is the change positive for Roche? And what do you see as the most significant element of the change at this point?
I think change and reform is great. And if I can reflect back, many years ago, I used to do work with the US FDA, and a big challenge was harmonization of regulatory approaches between the United States and Canada, which, when you think about it, that should be fairly simple. And now what we're looking at is a situation where perhaps China is becoming harmonized with the rest of the world, or many parts of the world, with respect to regulatory processes, be it expediting the IND approval process or accepting data from clinical studies in a different way around the world. So this is great. This is great for patients. It's great for industry. It's an opportunity to move products to patients faster in China as well as the rest of the world. It's good for the industry here. It's good for the industry all around the world. So support everything that's been said so far with respect to these changes, Greg.
Okay, and is there something that you think is like a key change, or is it, as Matthew said, sort of the combination of changes in the direction?
Well, if I can take it a totally different way with respect to change, and it's not necessarily just looking at our industry, our biotech and pharma industry in China, but looking at change within the country and within the world. A couple days ago, I was preparing for this discussion and looking into what's going on in China, what's going on with change. And I just happened to, and I have it right here, pick up the New York Times, and there's an article on the front page. The title is "China Gains on America in Artificial Intelligence." So what does that have to do with us in this industry? Within Roche, we use lots of data. We use lots of computers. And in the future, we believe one of our biggest competitors in healthcare will be Google. And not Pfizer or Merck or Sanofi. They will be competitors and collaborators as well. But in the future, one of our biggest competitors, as well as collaborators, will be Google. And this article in the New York Times talked about China with respect to Google, and talked about Baidu and Tencent and Alibaba and what's going on within China with respect to artificial intelligence, use of computing, and working with real-world data or big data. And what does that have to do with us? Well, that's what we do as well. We use lots of data. We use analysis of that data to drive our research, our patient selection and clinical studies, and what patients will best benefit from our products, our medicines. And that's what in Roche, we call this personalized healthcare. Use of lots of data, real-world data, and advances in computing, cognitive computing, artificial intelligence, machine learning. And this is the future of medicine. This is what we are positioning ourselves for within Roche to succeed, and China is making huge advances in this area. So in the United States, I mentioned Google as a competitor and collaborator. we are already collaborating with them in a large way. And 2 days ago, New York Times article on China and artificial intelligence. Yesterday, an article in Fierce Pharma, or Fierce Biotech, one of the two, about Google Ventures, and they have $2.4 billion invested or under management for startup companies. And the article had a big emphasis on bio as well as tech investments. In fact, we at Roche have a number of collaborations with Google venture companies to advance our position in machine learning, in real-world data, and the advancement of our medicines using these two resources. So in China as well, again, witness the advances in Google-like companies, maybe not Google itself in China, but Google-like companies. This will be the future of China medicine R&D and commercialization as well.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point, and maybe one we can come back to, but there are significant investments coming from the Googles of China, like Baidu and Tencent and so on, in the healthcare industry. So we're definitely seeing that in a big way. So Dr. Xiao, Pfizer has also been in China a long time, and you're very involved in the strategy here. You've also been involved in collaborations with some of the local Chinese companies. So maybe you can talk a little bit again about back to our question about, is the change positive overall for Pfizer, and how has that affected your business, and is there something that's really particularly exciting about the changes that are occurring?
Yeah, thank you. For the BD person is always optimistic. So my simple answer is yes, it's positive changes, but at the same time there are a lot of challenges. So if we look at some the rationale and the overall the national level strategies behind all these kind of changes, we can remember like at the beginning of this year, the government just announced the Health China 2030 as the national level strategy as the first time. So that's why there are a lot of based on this big vision, there are a lot of changes behind that, and also in the first round of healthcare information years ago, it's more focusing on the expanding the healthcare, the insurance coverage. It's the very the country with 1.3 billion population. It's a big challenge and difficult task for the government, and after that, we can find that the government also need to consider the next step, how to control the quality of the drugs, and also the how to establish the more the reasonable pricing system. So there are a lot of discussion on the price cut and the different kind of payment the schemes, and also the reimbursement, national level price negotiation. Those kind of things are ongoing. At the same time, there are also a lot of very inspiring the new regulatory related policies just announced, or some apply for the comments in R&D part, so to encourage innovation. So as Pfizer is the leading biopharmaceutical company in China, we are continually monitoring and analyze the policy changes and to adapt our strategies in China. So I think it's quite similar to Matthew just introduced as the big pharma in China. So one side for the current business, we are thinking about how can we leverage all this expansion trend, and and to grow our current business. We set up the geographic expansion in the county hospitals and in the community health centers. And at the same time, we are facing the pricing cut pressure. So we also consider in the commercial model, in the operation model, how can we be more efficient? can we leverage the new technologies and the other channels like multi-channel marketings to improve the overall productivity of the field force? Those kind of things. So there are different kinds of the innovation pilot in the commercial models, still also ongoing within Pfizer. So it's more in the commercial side. For the R&D side, the company also actively exploring different ways and adapt our strategy on how to accelerate our the pipeline registration and launch in China. So I believe, most of the MNCs all perceive these rounds of new announced the policies for comments, as a very positive trend, especially for those multinational companies, because there's a shortened R&D review time. There's the policies, for the accelerated approval for the products with strong unmet medical needs, and also for the clinical trial waiver for the rare disease, those kind of things. They're all positive. At the same time, for the big pharma like Pfizer, we also need a lot of effort to communicate with the headquarters and to let them also have the same understanding as us on the insights of those changes, and to engage them, convince them to involve China into more global studies. Yep. So that's for the internal side. For the external side, there will be increasing trend of local innovation. We already see that trend in the past 10 years. We will continually to monitor that, and the Pfizer is also exploring in the collaboration in R&D side with local players, local partners. And for that part, our colleague Dr. Ding from the Global External R&D and Innovation will have a presentation tomorrow morning and introduce more on what kind of collaboration Pfizer Global R&D is looking for in China. Thank you.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think you bring up a good point too, that the changes, while I think, at least I think of that mostly in terms of R&D and partnering, but it's also affecting the commercial side of things. But I think maybe commercial is coming along a little more slowly than the R&D side in terms of the regulatory changes. So Zhongqing, so back to you and Merck MSD. I think Merck has had the reputation for many years as being a strong partnering firm. I remember seeing charts at one of your presentations, not yours personally, but Merck's presentations, that you had been doing more partnering than any other of the big pharma at that time. This is a couple of years ago. But now you have established a large facility here. I think you have something over 500 scientists.
It's more than 500 scientists right now, yes.
So you made a big commitment to doing R&D in China. So what brought you to, I guess, the decision to expand your internal R&D and to do it in China?
Well, I think it's a really good question because, it's really to the company decision maker. We have to think about, what is overall China's commitment, China's strategy. Because when we talk about R&D, we all understand, R&D will require long-term investment and long-term commitment. If you really think about, hey, I invest some money, a year, 2 years, I like to have a return. It doesn't work in the R&D world. So the decision maker, top decision maker from every company really need to understand that, hey, if you really want to get some return in the R&D space, it takes a long time. So that really requires, specifically in China, it takes, you need to have the right people, have the right talents. You need to set up a right strategy. You need to have the right support from headquarters. I think Xiaohong also mentioned that, how to work with headquarters. That is always, big challenge from a China team's aspect, how to really work together, collaborate together with headquarters. And I think on the other aspect, I think, how to really build up the capability, team's capability in China, because as we just mentioned, the regulatory environment now is evolving, it's changed dramatically. it's a move to the positive direction. But how we can really execute the pipeline in the way that really can benefit from to the society, really capitalize the value for the company, I think it really depends upon the execution capability. If you can't execute the clinical trial work, I think all other changes don't matter to you. That's why I think from a long-term commitment aspect, you really need to think about, hey, with the positive policy change, so the long-term wise, how to build up the right team, right capability, so that hey, we can really capitalize the value of the policy change. I think that is the key to any company. I think to Merck, I guess that is what we have experienced over the past few years. We really spent a lot of time to build up our team. We try to really integrate the team internally across all different functions. We also spend a lot of effort to build up the connection with the headquarters. Those are areas I think is critically important. And also build up the connection with the local scientific community, with the KOLs. It's all critical. Without those components, I think it just all those changes that don't matter to you.
So that's talking about the connection with the local universities and institutes. That sort of brings up the question of innovation, and that's something that you had talked about, Matthew. That's I think you said that you're seeing more innovative products coming out of China now. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that and how you see innovation evolving, and particularly in like the BD&L side of things. Are you in licensing more from China now than you were, say, 5-6 years ago?
I think it's a work in progress situation. At least in my view, when I think of the innovation environment, again, I think of it more as an overall environment rather than specifically in certain therapy areas, for example, or for certain drugs. I think what we are looking at is indeed more in terms of innovation models and certain companies that have developed certain capabilities to move faster, cheaper. I think that's one area that we are looking at. Again, echoing your comments around our own capabilities and to what extent we can really follow suit in China with the pace of change. I think we are very familiar here, at least, with the pace of change, the new regulations coming every day, and we have learned to manage this. Having said that, it's something that is very difficult to understand from a headquarter point of view, and we are probably lacking, the ability and the time maybe to build up certain strong capabilities to help in the development. So if we can find that with partners, I think that's definitely one area at a time, again, where I think we see more and more very, very high quality companies building up in China. The second dimension, I think, is also echoing what was said earlier, is when you look at the entire value chain. Our business is not just about bringing drugs to the market. Yes, it is for a large part, and how we can benefit patients. But at the same time, for example, we have a strong business in diabetes. Now more and more we look at how we can provide better services to the patients, what we call integrated care, and that links to greater usage of technology, mobile health, indeed big data, where I think China here is really at the forefront alongside with the US, and where we will see, and we observe already more and more innovation that is very much catered to Chinese needs. So I think it's not just about how new drugs are coming up or popping up. I think, at least as far as my experience is concerned, what we see is more innovative approaches around maybe certain existing technologies, fast followers, maybe interesting combinations, way to tackle the need to bring innovative products combined with maybe a certain affordability in mind. But more importantly as well, if we look at the other dimensions of the value chain where things are really changing very, very much.
Okay, and you had mentioned too earlier about incubators, and of course Jinwan is building their new biomedical park, which will have a large incubation facility there. I know one thing that impressed me when I first came to China is, and this is 10 years ago, that someone took me around Zhangjiang High-Tech Park and said, well, here's an incubator building with 40 companies in it. In the US, you were sort of lucky to see an incubator with 4 companies in it at that time. So are you also seeing growth kind of in the incubators and maybe a maturation of the incubators in China?
Well, at least you know, certain incubators and certain parks are becoming more mature. And I think that is a very positive development. I think also traditionally, you know, we have been investing in the development of our own products and bringing them gradually for our own means to China. I think the fact that these parks are being developed provides additional opportunities for us. And maybe it's a way to have a win-win collaboration where indeed maybe we can bring something in the basket, but then leverage also local capabilities to develop more products that we would have been able to do on our own. So in that sense, I think it's a positive trend. And second, yes, you see more and more, you know, through the 1,000 now 10,000 talent program, you see more and more companies being set up. So I think it's more a matter of when than if things are happening and at which speed. Yes.
Okay, so Matthew mentioned the 1,000 Talents program, if you will. There's lots of programs supported by the China government for the Westerners in the audience that support R&D in new drug development here. There's the National Drug Development Program and so on. So there's a lot of money that can help entrepreneurs over the valley of death, as we call it in the West, in that early stage development here in China. So Mark, you have very broad responsibility, not just China. So you have, I think, maybe a broader perspective on how China is evolving. So if you were to take China and the evolution here and compare it to Japan, Korea, and so on, how is China doing? I know you're good at taking these open-ended questions. So.
Thanks. How is China doing? Let's talk about China as an innovation source. Is that okay? And how is China doing there? So we talked about innovation, and everybody here is interested in partnering. And what, from a Roche standpoint, and probably all of our standpoint, what are we interested in doing? We're looking at innovation. And what is innovation? It's something new. And in our case, we're not looking for biosimilars. We're not looking for generics. We're not looking at tweaks on an existing molecule. We're looking for something new, a new medicine, a new approach, a new target, a new mechanism. And that's innovation for us. And how is China doing? It's evolving, it's growing. And that's why we're all here at a partnering conference looking for that innovation in medicine. And as I mentioned before, also innovation from a technology standpoint. So the growth of the use of real-world data. Who has more patient data? Who has more patients than China? No one has more patients than China. So China will have more patient data than any other place in the world. So as the personalized healthcare story grows and the ability to utilize patient data grows from an innovation standpoint, China will be perhaps the major source of expertise and data and what to do about it. So again, as I said before, there are the two categories of data and computing. China is very, very good at innovation in this regard. The challenge then is how do we benefit patients? How do we derive something from that use of data and computing to benefit patients? And how is China doing? Really, really well here. And that's, again, something that from a partnering standpoint, it has a big impact on what we're doing in partnering in China and the rest of the world, because we are talking with the companies like IBM, like NVIDIA, like Google, like Apple, to expand our partnering collaborations, and we'll do the same here in China.
Okay, yeah, good. And by the way, I know there's at least one entrepreneur in the audience who's doing exactly what you're talking about, so he'll probably tackle you after the meeting here.
We'd be happy to chat.
All right, so Dr. Xiao, I guess kind of it seems like we're on an innovation discussion here, so let's follow through on that. And by the way, be thinking of your questions. We're about to open it up in just a couple of minutes here. So So how does Pfizer view innovation? And do you have like an active search for innovative molecules here in China, and how are you dealing with that side of things?
Yeah. This is definitely the key area we're working on. So, for the from the China BD side, besides we're looking for the in-licensing opportunity from the U.S., European, Japan, this markets, and we also are monitoring the innovation in China from the local the companies, because they're like the increasing trend in China due to the increasing of the talents in this area and a lot of the funding and also the government policy support behind that. Yeah, so that's why I think it's 3 years ago, we launched a strategy called iChina. Is the overall the objective of the strategy is to work together with the local partner to accelerate the Pfizer global pipeline, launch in China. At the same time, we will also leverage our global resources and the experience and expertise, and to work together with the local partner, and also we also would like to be part of the trend of the China innovation. We already announced the deal with the local partner, ChinaBio, in last year in the diabetes area. So still working on other projects in that area. That's for the iChina part, and also from the global the R&D and innovation part, they are also actively monitoring the trend. Not only in asset part, but also in the technology, in the platform part, and they also announced some the collaboration with the startup company based in Chengdu, called Hitachi, and also so we believe that to be part of that. To get more understanding and more insights is the critical step. Yeah,
and you mentioned two interesting companies. HitGen has been very active in doing a lot with the multinationals, and PegBio was actually, they presented at our very first conference in December 2007, our first partnering forum. So good to see that they're moving along and doing well. Okay, so we're ready for the audience. I think we have a couple of mic runners, right, Tom? So hold up your hand and we'll run a mic to you. Is that Paul in the back of the room there? May take a while to get a mic back there. There's somebody up front. Here, we got some.
I've got one. It's okay.
Okay, all right. Good. Go.
Thank you for this panel. A very quick question. I've heard, and a colleague here this morning has heard something that's a little bit the same, and that is for companies that are looking for investments from China, they're companies in the United States or Canada, that it is becoming a little more difficult for funds to leave China. And this has been noticed just in the last 6 months or so. Was there a policy change, or have you seen this? Could anybody from the panel comment?
So Paul, I'm going to intercede here because that's really a question for another panel, for our VC panel, not the big pharma panel. So we'll take that another time. Yes, there's a policy change. Well, there isn't a law change, but there's sort of an increased enforcement. So if you're doing legitimate things, you can still get out of China, but it's been curtailed, yes. So, Jim, we had a question up here.
Great comments all around. I'd like to direct a question to the panel for a little crystal ball gazing. As a patent attorney active in China for the past 10 years, I've noticed an incredible uptick in brilliant innovation in China. And as US funding for the sciences gets curtailed, and as there is capital sloshing around, what are you most excited about looking 2 to 4 years out? Because it's not a linear progression in the healthcare field in China, it's going exponential. And as China has greater supercomputing power than anywhere else, more unique data structures than anywhere else, and more unique ways to pay, what are you most excited about as you look not just in the next 18 months, but be a little colorful, 2 to 4 years out?
And when you say, are you asking for like what technology areas or?
I leave it to the panel to what drives them and inspires them the most. I am saying from an innovation perspective, I'm extremely excited on what I've seen come through China in the last 24 months. That's not traditional, but is absolutely remarkable, both from homegrown talent as well as from remarkable people coming back to China to implement. So we're looking at exciting times. What most excites you looking to the future, putting it out a few years?
Okay. Mark, you look like you're ready for
I'm
that
happy
one.
to chat about that. We're really excited as well because we see the same trends. We see the patents, we see the publications, and that's why we're here from a partnering standpoint. That's why we're here. And Roche has 7,000 people in China, internal people, but what we're really interested in is the partnering aspect because we see those trends as well. However, there's a big challenge, and that's that translation from that excellent basic science into something that would be of value for patients, the translational medicine of targets, of new mechanisms, of new publications, of new deliveries, and turning that into meaningful science that can be used in medicines. And so this will be the challenge because there are other parts in the world where there is also good science going on. Now the scale is a little bit different, but good science going on. The challenge then, and this is where Big Pharma can add some expertise, is the translational piece. Same excitement, we see those same trends, big challenge, translating those into that science into medicine.
I think from my perspective, there are two areas I think it's really exciting. I think one area is that, you know, all of us know that quite a few years ago, that China's drug development is really lag behind the worldwide. It's several years behind. But that phenomenon was the same in Japan many years ago. But what happened in Japan is that, you know, actually it happened that, you know, some drug was in the market first in Japan, ahead of other countries like the United States. I think what's exciting to us is that, you know, there's a great opportunity sometime in the near future. Potentially, China can become the first market for new product ahead of other countries. I think that is quite exciting. I think a second area I think is exciting is that, you know, there are a lot of innovations happening in China. I think a lot of companies, a lot of venture capitals are trying to really invest in China. It's possible that in the near future, sometime point, some of the innovation really happen in China. You know, those products based on China can really go to other countries, go to other markets, and not just benefit to patients in China, but, you know, globally, whole patient population can benefit from the innovation in China.
I think that's a really interesting point. Maybe we'll come back to that in just a minute. Go ahead, Matthew.
When I arrived in Asia back in 2008, we conducted a strategic review in our company, and then we looked at the different areas of business that we wanted to be present in. And a big driver to do that was, you know, we see big significant change coming in China. And I would argue that 8 years after, okay, we have had our ups and downs. There has been the crisis, usual things happening in the country, but basically our numbers are bigger and our business profile has not fundamentally changed. I think what excites me and I think what excites our company most is that we now really see changes happening in the next 4 to 5 years. And whether it's how we do business, whether we look at the operating environment from a regulatory standpoint, whether we look at other dimensions of innovation, including big data, high tech, and so on and so forth, I think this will really put China at the center of our company strategy, and I think this is really, really important.
Dr. Xiao, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, if we look at the local innovation in the past years, if we look at at the beginning, most of them the Me Too. And if we look at the current years, we can find that the companies start to explore like the first-in-class area, and also they're more like the local the innovation companies. They kick off or implement the clinical trials for these innovation assets, not only in China, but also in like the major markets, especially more companies kick off like the clinical trial in parallel in US. So that's a very important change. And also they're like more writtenese, and to like set up like the stronger like the R&D platforms with the supporting from government and also from the fundings. So we really looking forward to seeing the future trends and the more like the deliverables through that all this kind of the changes.
So at least you and Zhongqing brought up sort of the, not just a scientific innovation, but sort of innovative way of doing drug development in China. Because it used to be that big pharma would develop their drugs in the US or Europe, get approval there, and then come to China. So China was getting drugs 8-10 years behind what the rest of the world is, which is still a problem today. I think there's only 3 or 4 of the major cancer drugs available in China, for example. So do you see this as a major change? I'd just like to get a quick answer because I want to go back to the audience. But do you see this as it will literally change the way that the big pharma are developing drugs in China and may actually get their first approvals in China?
It opens opportunity for that, but as we know that all of those recent reforms, in terms of a timeline, how they will be implemented, I think there's still a lot of uncertainty we're facing. There was a big discussion a few days ago in Shanghai and DIA. I think a lot of government officers attended that discussion. I guess, we really need to see, what's going on over the next couple of months, how those policies will be implemented here.
Yeah, and as mentioned earlier, the MAH program is a pilot program, so that we're not sure what will happen. We think it will continue. But any other comments on that before we go back to the audience? Okay, all right. Audience questions? All right, I see one up here, one back there, and one in the middle.
Hi, Scott, it's Frank. I have a question to Pfizer. So in terms of external innovation, globally, Pfizer is particularly known for their strategy to acquire their partners or potential partners. How's this in China? Because here's the situation, it's much more difficult. Is this something that you're looking into to find acquisition targets in China?
I think Dr. Ding will cover some like more information in his presentation tomorrow morning. But in overall, so currently we are more using like the virtual platform, like as the incubator, to better monitor and to be part of the trend of the increasing of Chinese innovation. So currently there's like the Pfizer collaborate with local partners to set up like the virtual incubator named NetVision in China. So there's like put the company put our like the expertise, experience and into that, and also we leverage the talent, local talent, and the local fundings, and it's more focusing on some like the new technology platform in the early stage, the R&D. So I think you can if you can join the company presentation tomorrow, you can learn more information from Dr. Ding's presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have another one queued up? We have one here, or one. Let's do this one if we can. This is our AI entrepreneur.
Hi, I'm Kent Zalik from Mozi. And we're actually focusing on AI research right now for biomedical research. So I guess this question is really directed at Mark. So what kind of interesting technologies are you focusing right now and exploring, utilizing AI and other techniques currently within your R&D efforts at the moment? And specifically, and also to add to that, what do you see the differences between the technologies in China developing towards that, and also in the technologies in the United States, and how can they actually converge to actually support this innovation in a global scale?
Right. So I'm going to be general in response, but thanks for the question. The application of computing, and call it whatever it is, artificial intelligence, cognitive computing, machine learning, heuristics, or whatever, it's just computers and data, right? And we are, as I mentioned, we are looking at approaches like Watson, IBM's Watson, and a lot of our colleagues in the pharma industry already have collaborations with Watson. It's, again, simply the advanced application of computing to data. What are the advantages of Chinese technology approaches for the healthcare industry? Well, they're developing, and read this article about the advancement of artificial intelligence in China for everyone, and you probably already know this, but I'll be just very vague and say we're interested in seeing how it develops in China. We expect very fast development in China, and that's one thing we're looking at here. So just kind of a general response, sorry.
Okay, Alan?
Alan Lu from Sonomics. We are doing new drug development by applying RNA interference technology. This question may be overlapped with the question some other have asked. We know all the big pharmas spend a lot of time to search for small biotech to get new products, get a new technology. This question for all the four representatives from big pharma. I'm sure you have the team to evaluate the Chinese biotech companies. What is your general evaluation for the Chinese small biotech company to develop new drugs? Thank you.
So I think, Alan, and correct me if I'm not interpreting your question correctly, but you guys are doing some novel stuff and you're looking to potentially partner with a big pharma. So you're asking what kind of criteria do they look for in a partner company? So, okay.
Well, I think it's a fairly big question. I think it's not only about, those colleagues who are working in China, but globally, how we are going to really look at the external opportunity. I think in general, I think for Merck, it's really about, few key things. It's really about the competitive advantage. Do we have the unambiguous promotable advantage? In other words, will these assets being able to translate into some assets that really, in terms of competition in the market, that you can build up your advantage? That must be based on the foundation. The foundation to that is that, hey, you have to have the unmet medical needs. I think either it's in China or outside of China, look at, same class, do you have some advantage over there?
So Mark mentioned novel mechanism of action, novel target. Is that true for Merck as well? Everything has to be totally novel?
Well, I think, it's an unmet medical need. It could be novel, because in the past, we always talk about first in the class, best in the class. But I think now it's really look at the assets, do we have the advantage there?
Yeah, I think for us, there are a bit two approaches. One, is it completely novel? And then in that case, I think in terms of discussion, we probably envisage a global discussion, meaning something that would be interesting not only if it's novel and novel enough, it's not only interesting for China, but it's interesting for the world. So I think that's one element. And then in terms of partnering approach, it's very much, we're very much agnostic to our approach. So it depends really on the stage and competitive advantage or key strengths of the company and where we can help? Is there an area in the phase of development, whether it's translation, whether it's development, where we can help? And I think that's one criteria, and then that caters to certain teams, in our organization. And I would say on the other side of the spectrum, is it something that addresses indeed an unmet medical need in China? And there, it is obviously also something that we are looking at. So, and here I think it works both ways. Can we leverage again the strengths of the company with what we can bring, or vice versa? Can we maybe bring in something and then the local company is going to take it to a stage that we would not have been able to do it on our own? So,
Just real quick, I'll say two things. One, is there sound science with a reason to believe that we can turn this into medicine? And two, can we work with the company? And I could talk about diligence and 25 people looking at all kinds of data and such, but really it's, is there sound science with reason to believe, and can we work with the people? That's it.
Good, good. And Dr. Xiao?
I'd like to fully echo Mark's comments. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that about wraps us up because we need to transition the room a little bit. So please thank all of our panelists. They've done a great job.